What do Charlie Javis, Elizabeth Holmes, Martin Shkreli, and Sam Bankman-Fried all have in common? Now, if you answered that they were all part of the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, then you would be at least mostly correct. But more specifically, they're all members of the Forbes 30 Under 30 list that turns out to be criminals and or frauds. In fact, in all but Martin Shkreli's case, the very same thing that got them onto the Forbes 30 Under 30 list turned out to be completely faked. Sam Bankman-Freed is pretty much a household name these days after his entire, FTX downfall. Elizabeth Holmes started a medical technology company called Theranos, and it grew to be valued at around $10 billion. The only issue with this company was it was literally entirely all a lie. The lab results of this supposed Theranos technology were either gotten from other companies or literally just made up entirely. And this obviously caused a lot of issues because if you make up results to lab tests, then you get a tremendous amount of misdiagnoses. And this eventually led her to be sentenced to prison time. Charlie Javis created a program that would help students navigate getting student financial aid to try and make the process as easy as possible and also get them the biggest amount that they could qualify for. After 5 million people used the service successfully, she sold the company to JP Morgan and Chase for $175 million. The only issue with this company was that only 300,000 people ever used it. The 5 million number? The other 4.7 million people were entirely made up. The accounts were ones that she had a data scientist create in order to fake the information for the sale. Martin Shkreli didn't even do anything new or interesting. He just ran literally a good old-fashioned Ponzi scheme. He would accept investments from investors, and then he would use those investments he had just gotten to pay off old investors and make them think that the company was working, and then he would continue to accept money from them, and the cycle continued until, of course, he was caught in jail. And while the criminal aspects of the Forbes 30 Under 30 are the easiest and most fun to talk about, realistically, basically every aspect of the Forbes 30 Under 30 list is either problematic or entirely meaningless. And when I say problematic, I don't mean like socially problematic, like promoting sexist or racist ideas is, but I mean it pushes people in the direction of something or promotes something that is a problem for the audience that it appeals to. And these problems usually have something to do with self-esteem as we glorify the rich, or mental health issues as we inevitably compare ourselves to these people that are around about our age, but able to accomplish so much more than we ever could. There are also a host of other issues that come along with this, but I promise we will get to all of those later. And as for being entirely meaningless, I actually want to prove this in person, so to speak, so I'm going to take you over to my computer where we're going to go through the Forbes 2022 30 Under 30 list, and I'll be able to show you what I mean by a lot of these people just didn't really do anything interesting. Welcome to the computer. Now, in order to prove that I'm being entirely fair and not just cherry picking, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the second section of the first Forbes 30 Under 30 category when you go to the website. And the reason that I'm choosing the second section and not the first is because the first section is music, and that's so subjective that I don't feel comfortable commenting on it because I like to keep my videos grounded in facts, logic, and reasonable arguments, none of which can be had when Jack Harlow is playing because his music is garbage. So the first section under the music section is the marketing and advertising category. And once you scroll down, the first person there is Melanie Fillet. And then you're able to read what makes her so incredibly significant that she's on this very exclusive list of just 30 people. And as it turns out, she has a company that's called Speak It, which basically just puts training manuals and employee handbooks all in one place so it's easier to access. And honestly, for something as exclusive as the Forbes 30 Under 30, this seems kind of simple and almost insignificant. And the fact that she only has $12 million in funding and only 90 employees really just reinforces my meaningless comment from earlier, because lots of companies get $12 million in funding, and many companies have 90 or more employees. As far as the business world goes, this is pretty small stakes. But it's not just Melanie. The trend continues when you look at the other people on the list. This is Akil Alvin, and he has a multimedia content creation company that got revenue of about $2 million. Now, $2 million is a wonderful amount of money to make off of a content creation company. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not downplaying how hard he worked or the accomplishments that he's managed to get. But in the grand scheme of things, $2 million is really not that much. I would bet most big YouTubers make well over that in content creation every year, but none of them are on this list. Kristen Mark and Matthew Lowe also don't have anything particularly interesting on here. They just do social media influencing management. And there are lots of companies that do social media influencing management. And honestly, this probably isn't even one of the bigger ones. Now that's all I'm going to go through for now, but it remains pretty consistently true for all of the people on this marketing and advertising list, and you're welcome to go through it yourselves. But you get the idea, I think, of what I'm talking about when I used the meaningless comment. Now, the accomplishments of these people are not insignificant, and probably they worked very hard for their $12 million in funding, or their 90 employees, or their $2 million in revenue. I'm not downplaying the effort that was involved in getting something out of probably what was essentially nothing. I'm saying that the weight that this Forbes 30 Under 30 brand carries makes it seem like these are the individuals of the future who are revolutionizing the things for the categories that they're nominated for. But then when you look at these lists, and you look at them realistically, they're just starting another company that does probably something pretty similar to what 100 other companies would do. The only difference is they're able to do it fairly successfully. And that's what I mean by the list is entirely meaningless. There's not anything really unique or new. But in this title, I didn't say the Forbes 30 Under 30 list is meaningless. I called it a disgrace. And so I want to take you through every part of why I believe that that is the case. But to start, we first have to understand what Forbes 30 Under 30 actually is. The Forbes 30 Under 30 list is a list of 30 individuals that Forbes believes, for some reason or another, are very interesting or are doing something revolutionary, and ergo they should be highlighted. And for those of you that are just kind of smiling and nodding along with the video, you probably did not catch that that is not true, and I completely lied to you. It is not a list of 30 people. It's a list of 600 people, because I guess Forbes doesn't know how to count, and probably most of you were like, well, yeah, dumbass, it's not a list of 30 people, it's a list of 30 categories of 30 people that are under the age of 30. Everybody knows that. And yeah, I'm probably one of the few people that didn't know that, except that I lied again. It is a list of 20 categories with 30 people each who are under the age of 30 that did something that Forbes believe is unique, which right off the bat makes whatever this list is supposed to be much less impressive. But to be fair, 600 under 30 really does not carry the same ring. Now, 30 Under 30 was launched by a man by the name of Randall Lane in 2011. He was the editor-in-chief at Forbes, and he wanted something that would appeal to a more millennial audience, and as such, he started the Under 30 brand, and it absolutely exploded in popularity, gaining tens of thousands of nominations just within the first few years that the list was live. Now, the main reason for this launch was that Forbes was starting to be viewed as kind of an old person brand. It didn't appeal to young people as much, kind of in the same way that MySpace or AOL are viewed by young people now. And Forbes knew that if they wanted to stay relevant to the younger generations, then they needed to start featuring more young people. And so they started this whole new brand under the Forbes name in order to appeal to people of the younger age. And the Under 30 brand absolutely exploded in popularity, which led to an annual Under 30 summit being created, and also a social media app being built that was exclusive to people that had been on the Under 30 list. And I cannot fathom how bad that social media must be. You know that every single person on that social media thinks that everyone in the world wishes they could be cool enough to be on that social media app, and realistically, not only does nobody know it actually exists, but the people that do know could not care less. And also, the social media app was made in partnership with Tinder, which means we don't even get the fun, lighthearted, well-adjusted under 30 people. We get the weird single ones who are both rich and famous and still cannot get a date. Now, the summits are similar to TED Talks, where you go and you're able to hear the people from these lists talk about the things they did or the ideas that they have that might help improve the world in some way or another. And the very first Forbes Under 30 was headlined by none other than Monica Lewinsky, someone who is neither under 30 nor was ever on the Under 30 list. So, great start there, Forbes. Now, weirdly enough, Forbes itself does not have any kind of a bio or an About Me section for the Under 30 brand. In my notes for this part, I wrote, for the Under 30 section, define what Forbes says it is, and then talk about what it really is. But I cannot for the life of me find what Forbes says it is. It's not anywhere on the website. But the 2023 version has a little article about this year's list that says, quote, in a topsy-turvy year, one thing remains constant. Tomorrow's brightest young leaders are turning to entrepreneurship to solve the world's biggest problems on their own terms. Except that every single person we looked at earlier in this video not only isn't really solving the world's problems, but they're kind of just making another version of companies that already exist. The things they're doing are interesting and maybe even a little bit unique, but they're not original. Now, I'm not saying that nobody on this list is using entrepreneurship to solve the world's biggest problems. Nor am I saying that the people that have started these companies, whether or not they're solving the world's problems, don't work incredibly hard for what they have. But I'm saying if you're gonna pitch to everybody that you're building a list of the 600 individuals that are building companies that have changed or are going to change the world, then you actually need to build a list of 600 people who are building companies that have changed or are going to change the world. This is classic bait and switch. Forbes 30 Under 30 has been running since 2011, which means there are probably around 7,000 people that have been on this list. And not only can I not name a single one of them except for the ones that I've looked up in order to make this video, I feel like if one of them had done something huge that changed the world, I would have heard about it, right? So if the Forbes 30 Under 30 list is not actually the brightest young entrepreneurs that are dedicating their lives to solving the world's biggest problems, then what is it? I would like to assert that Forbes 30 Under 30 list is a problematic, parasitical marketing tactic in order to maintain Forbes' relevancy by preying on the fame of other people. And the first problem that I want to talk about that Forbes 30 Under 30 pushes is an obsession with age. I'm in my mid-20s, and I've lived what I believe most would consider a fairly average life. I have two middle-class parents. I graduated high school with fairly average grades. I went to an unremarkable college and then graduated from there with a really overpriced piece of paper. And then I got a job making just slightly below national average. And not only has this run-of-the-mill life I lead never bothered me, I actually kind of enjoy it. I'm very happy where I am, and I would bet that my situation is very similar to the situations of a lot of the people that are watching this video right now. But if I was to be as head deep as a lot of people my age and younger are in social media, I don't think I would be nearly happy as I am now with where I am in life. I think I would be disappointed that I've accomplished essentially nothing extraordinary, despite the fact that I am the same age as a lot of the people on these lists. Now, I don't think it's any secret that American society is obsessed with aging. In fact, one 2019 study by the Global Ipsos Advisor found that 60% of Americans feel negatively about aging, and another study by Pfizer found that 87% of Americans were afraid of getting old, and the anti-aging market is expected to reach about $22.5 billion by 2026. And on top of that, 30 is such a stupid and arbitrary number to pick when highlighting the accomplishments of young people. It creates this artificial divide between people that are older than 30 and people that are younger than 30, with the subliminal message being that if you are older than 30, then you have missed out on your prime for some reason. And not only is this stupid according to just common sense, but it is also stupid according to statistics, with Forbes themselves reporting on a study that shows that the likelihood of success of a founder of a company increases with age until the age of 60. And more specifically, people that are 50 years old are almost twice as likely to start an extremely successful company as opposed to someone that is 30 years old. Now, there are going to be some people that argue and say, oh, well, according to that, if you are under the age of 30, then it's more interesting that you managed to succeed, and that should be highlighted. And to that, I would say, no, because not only does it create unrealistic expectations for anyone that sees this 30 Under 30 list, but it also creates unrealistic expectations for the entrepreneurs themselves. If they're under the age of 30 and they've been highlighted as one of the greats of our time so young, then that creates a tremendous amount of pressure for them to continue to be one of the greats as they get older. And considering how very young they are, continuing to be one of the greats for the rest of their lives is a very long time to be pressured to be great. And so with this kind of public and fame-based pressure to continue to be relevant and big and interesting, it's no wonder that a lot of them turned to things that turned out to be fraudulent because they were trying to maintain what they had before and what people expected them to be. We're highlighting people that are under 30 years old to other people that are also under 30 years old, as if that age bears any kind of relevancy on anything, frankly. And not only is the 30 number irrelevant, but continuously touting the number as if it is relevant is really very detrimental, because it leads to a huge amount of people under the age of 30 believing that they're missing their opportunity and are falling behind the rest of the pack somehow, when realistically and statistically, they are fine probably until they're around 60. But when you have a bunch of young and ambitious and entrepreneurial people being told that they basically have until the age of 30 to start to do something big and successful, you get the rise of things like people essentially selling themselves on social media to try and gain a following. And those that can't sell themselves and gain a following feel like failures for literally no good reason at all. And along with this, you get the rise of get-rich-quick schemes and the entrepreneurial marketing gurus that we see all over YouTube, because these people feel like they are falling behind and they need to catch up with what they perceive as the rest of the pack, because they are running a race they believe, but that race does not actually exist. And the ones that do succeed, which is a very, very, very small percentage, by the way, are touted by themselves and others and lists like 30 Under 30 as the next big greats. They're touted as role models in the future, and they are touted as more significant than you because you work a 9-to-5 job and you're poor. What a loser. And this constant pedestaling of these young people leads to an incredibly unhealthy culture of celebrity worship. Now, there's nothing wrong with finding celebrities interesting, and as such, wanting to keep up with them on social media or newsletters or whatever. If someone makes movies that you love, or writes books that you enjoy, or makes podcasts that you listen to, it's natural to be interested in them and the art that they create. And subsequently, it's natural to want to keep up with them, or maybe even to get in touch with them. And there is literally nothing wrong with that. The issue comes when we start to elevate these people who are interesting, but not more deserving of stuff than you or I. It's an issue because we start to elevate them to a level that suggests that they might, for some reason, be deserving of more stuff than you or I. And there's nothing wrong with giving these people some attention. The issue is when the cost of you giving them that attention is attention being taken away from things that actually matter. Think of issues like homelessness or the opioid crisis. These are things that we need to be more concerned about and pay more attention to than we are. But we're not, because the limited capacity we have to pay attention to something is being taken up, at least partially, by things that don't matter, like the Under 30 brand. With things like the Forbes 30 Under 30, you're told that these people are deserving of your attention and your admiration and kind of your worship as well. But because humans have a limited amount of time and attention that they're able to give to issues and concerns outside of their personal lives, by constantly facing time and attention of people towards these younger people that really don't need the time or attention, you are by association facing it away from problems that could probably use more people's attention. Almost all of the people on the list are not changing the world. And many of them on the list aren't even doing anything new. Now, I'm not saying that none of the people on the list are doing something that's beneficial. I'm sure in the science or technology section, there's some genius that is curing cancer. But that's such a small percentage of the list at large, which is primarily packed with people who are just capitalizing on an industry or a concept that already exists. And yet we're being told that these people are the future and role models and are deserving of your attention and should serve as your inspiration for how you live your life. And there's nothing wrong with role models and inspiration, as long as those role models and that inspiration is delivered in healthy doses. But you're being told that this is what success looks like. And don't get me wrong, this is one facet of what success can look like, but it's being marketed as if this is the only thing that success can look like. But do you know what else success can look like? Working a job you enjoy and hanging out with the people that you love. Success can look like having a happy family, whether that's a partner and kids or having like a bunch of dogs. Success can look like doing what you love, even if it doesn't pay well. Something like ecological conservation, or being a park ranger, or a teacher. But lists like the Forbes 30 Under 30 narrow down success into a very specific target of success equals fame and money and fortune. And I'm sure all of the people on the list are good people that have worked harder than I could ever imagine to get what they are and have what they have. But they are absolutely not a mold that all of us around this age should be trying to fit ourselves into. Most people want to be successful, but also most people define what success is in accordance to what their values are. But we're being told that if you want to be successful, then you need to be doing what these people are doing. You need to be building companies and making lots of money. And if you're not building companies and you're not making lots of money, then you cannot, by definition, call yourself successful. You're being told that if you want to be successful, then you have to follow in the footsteps of these people because they are important and they should be the scale against which you weigh yourself and your accomplishments and weigh whether or not you can be deemed successful. This arbitrary goal of being successful was set by companies like Forbes. And then they started giving out awards to people they believed were accomplishing this very thin view of success. These awards should mean almost nothing, but they mean a tremendous amount to a lot of people. And that brings us to the issue of value and bias in award shows. Probably a lot of people that watch my channel find award shows kind of cringy and out of touch. It's just a bunch of rich and famous people giving other rich and famous people awards for being rich and famous people. And the reason that I know this is probably correct is there's been a pretty significant decline in the interest of award shows, specifically and most significantly, the Oscars. But I don't think there's been a decline in the interest of awards themselves. But the issue is that there's two kinds of awards. There's fact-based awards, which tend to be pretty uncontroversial, and then there are value-based awards. And that's where the issues are. Fact-based awards are pretty easy to give out. These are the people that did something better than anyone else could do it. You get an award in the Olympics if you're a better runner than everyone else, and it's very hard to dispute that you're the best runner because you crossed the finish line first. It's not really open to value interpretations or biased judgments. And even if you were a horrible person and commits atrocities like chewing jawbreakers, it's still inarguable that you are the best runner. However, the value-based awards are in a different category because it's based on what people think is important, aka their values. A value-based award is something like Best Picture, or a Pulitzer Prize, or a Forbes 30 Under 30 name recognition. However, the issue with these value-based awards is they have unavoidable bias based on whatever the values are of the people that are handing out the award. Say I had a relative that died of cancer, and then at the same time, I'm also one of the people that is giving out the science-based award for the Forbes 30 Under 30. Then imagine there's two nominees, one that's invented, say, air-powered cars, and then one that's invented a cure to cancer. Based on my past, I very likely will have a value and a bias leaning towards the person that figured out a way to cure cancer. Or say I was old and getting concerned about my old age. I might be biased towards someone who had invented some way to make people live longer or appear younger. It's not necessarily good or bad that these values exist, but it is important to know that they exist. They are unavoidable and every single person has them. And luckily for us, Forbes 30 Under 30 has made it very easy for us to see what their value/bias is because of this article from 2017 on how the 30 Under 30 works. They say, quote, "For each of the 20 categories, reporters select 60 to 80 finalists. Our bias leans towards entrepreneurs over corporate ladder climbers and innovators over caretakers." And this is very interesting because it makes a very direct and obvious value judgment that entrepreneurs are more important than ladder climbers and innovators are more important than caretakers. But then if you think about it, what's wrong with a corporate ladder climber or a caretaker? Not only is that what most of us are, but it for some reason places a value on something that's new over something that's current and being maintained. It gives preference to modern things like new technology over things like the technology we currently have that we're keeping active. And that's a problematic view because it puts people who are trying to invent or innovate something new over people that are maintaining things as they are. And these are people like plumbers and electricians and car mechanics who are trying to keep the things that we already have running well because that's what most of us use. Why is it more important that people build and use and buy brand new shiny things rather than keeping the current things we have running well? And it's lists like this that make value judgments of things that are new versus things that are maintained that give us issues like all of the trades being wildly understaffed. It's because we're awarding new things, but we are not awarding maintaining and taking care of the things we already have that almost all of us use. Why can't success look like climbing the corporate ladder at a company you like and that treats you well for 5 or 10 years until you have an executive position and you do what you enjoy, and then after a few years there, you're able to retire comfortably? That seems like a success to me. Now, in some instances, some work is more valuable than other work. Building hospitals in impoverished countries is probably more important than my marketing job. But why is my marketing job, which maintains and takes care of the profit of my clients, less important than someone else's job where they started a company? A company that may very well hire me to run their marketing to maintain and take care of their profits. And it's also worth pointing out that supposedly the bias leans towards entrepreneurs and innovators, and then most of the people on the list haven't really created anything new. Almost none of the people in the marketing section of the Under 30 invented or innovated a new way of marketing. They just took a way that already existed and successfully built a new company around it. Just like nobody in the music section of the Under 30 created a new genre of music. They just took genres of music that already existed and then built successful careers around them. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with taking something that already exists, making it your own, and then building something that's worth something around it. And there's actually nothing even really wrong with getting an award for it. But just because Usain Bolt ran faster than everyone else doesn't mean he's an innovator. He's just really fast. In fact, some of the most significant and noteworthy innovations that have come out of the Forbes 30 Under 30 is new and innovative ways to commit crime on a massive scale. Now, this section is both the easiest and the hardest to talk about. It's the easiest because there's not any kind of a value call or a bias. You're pretty much either a criminal or not a criminal. You either defrauded people out of $8 billion or you didn't defraud people out of $8 billion. There's not a whole lot of room for gray area there. But it's also the most difficult one to talk about because basically every YouTuber ever has made a million videos about the people on this list, like Sam Bankman-Freed from FTX or Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos. There's not anything new I could say that dozens of other videos on YouTube haven't already said. So I'm going to take a different approach here and say when it comes to Forbes 30 Under 30 criminals, there are two kinds. The first kind of person is a person who is related the Under 30 award and in a completely unrelated circumstance then becomes a criminal. And the second and more important one is people who were put on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, but the reason they were put on the list or the innovation or entrepreneurship that they did was directly the thing that turned out to be fraudulent. For example, the only reason that Charlie Javis made it onto the Forbes 30 Under 30 is because she built a fintech company that was valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. Except the hundreds of millions of dollars that the company was valued on was based on the fact that they had millions of users, none of which actually existed. It's like buying an art museum that's valued at hundreds of millions of dollars because of all the paintings that are inside. And then when you walk in, there are no paintings. Much in the same way that you would buy a PS5 and then realize PS5 got no games. But both of these groups are bad for Forbes because you either recognized someone for something that turned out to be fake or illegal, or you pedestaled someone as a role model that turned out to be a horrible person and a criminal. Even if Martin Shkreli hadn't committed securities fraud, he would still be worth criticizing because he was one of the people that raised the price of life-saving drugs a tremendous amount on multiple occasions. In both the instances of Forbes Under 30 turned criminal, Forbes is absolutely at fault because frankly, they should have known. They need to be researching in depth the people that they're highlighting as role models and innovators. Some people might say, oh, well, it's not reasonable that they'd have known because no one else knew, so why should they? But they don't get a pass because it's not reasonable that they would have known because it is their job to do research, to figure these people out. Forbes is one of the sources that people cite when they are trying to figure out if something is true or legitimate. If I didn't know what FTX was, but then I saw an advertisement for it, and then I typed FTX into Google and saw that there was a Forbes article about it, then I might read the article and then read up a little on Sam Bankman-Fried and then see that not only is he a billionaire entrepreneur and innovator, but he was also featured on Forbes 30 Under 30. That lends him credibility, and so I may trust Forbes' research and the journalistic integrity of their articles and say, oh, well, this is a valuable brand that I can invest in. When you're a journalistic company of that size, you need to go beyond reasonable because you need to be held to a higher standard. And that goes for so many professions. I personally do not know how to treat clinical depression because it's not reasonable for me to know. That takes years of schooling, but it is reasonable for me to expect that a licensed therapist would be able to treat clinical depression because that's his job. We should have higher standards for people whose job it is to do these things. I don't know much about the law, but if I go to a lawyer and he says, well, it's not reasonable for most people to know so much about the law, I would say that's your job. You need to go beyond reasonable and be held to a higher standard. I don't know much about business and investing, but I should reasonably be able to trust Forbes, which is one of the largest business-based magazines and publications in the world, is doing their research to provide valuable and accurate information about the people that they're choosing to highlight. It is reasonable for me to hold Forbes to a higher standard and criticize them for pedestaling criminals. So if the Forbes system is outdated, full of criminals, and building unhealthy idols for young people, then what is the real value of the Forbes 30 Under 30 list? Okay, spoiler, it is money. But you probably already knew that. But money as a motivator isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it could even be a good thing if it does things like spur innovation. But I want to be very clear when I say giving awards does not mean you innovated. We've had award-giving ceremonies for as long as we've had famous people. The real value of Forbes 30 Under 30 is associating itself with soon-to-be famous people, people who are already famous, are people who could potentially become famous. That way, when they blow up, the Forbes under 30 name blows up with them. And then as they rise through stardom, it becomes part of their legacy that they were on that list. And then when it becomes part of their legacy that they were on this list, then that is a huge amount of publicity for the entire under 30 brand. See, Forbes 30 under 30 is a huge brand, reaching roughly 26 million people. And do you know how much money the attention of 26 million people is worth? That was a real question. I don't. But I feel like it's gotta be a lot. But the whole idea is that it feeds into a cycle where you're put on the list. And so you promote the list to your followers, and then your followers go to the list and see the other people that are on it and become interested in it and keep up with it. And the cycle continues with the brand growing along with it. This flow of attention drives relevancy for Forbes, and relevancy for Forbes drives money for Forbes. The real value of the Forbes 30 under 30 is your attention on the Forbes brand. But very importantly, that value is not reciprocated. Now, it might be interesting or exciting or cool to see your favorite celebrities on the Forbes 30 under 30, and it might even provide you with some entertainment. But at the end of the day, let's take a look at what you get out of this and then what Forbes gets out of this. At the very best, you get entertained for a few minutes and maybe a conversation topic for the dinner table. But at the very worst, you get self-esteem issues because these people are around your age and they are rich and successful. And you're not. But if we take a look at what Forbes gets, at the very best, they get billions and billions of dollars. And at the worst, they get billions and billions of dollars. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Attention is the new currency for tech giants. And your attention is worth more than gold. Now, if you take away nothing else from this video, just understand this. You're doing fine. Actually, you're doing great. Run your own race headed towards success on terms that you define and nobody defines for you, and then accomplish those goals. And most importantly, do not forget to love yourselves and all of the people around you, and I'll catch you next video.